I was asked to talk about our STEM initiative, which is a state-level STEM initiative for education and workforce development, and tell you the story. It's kind of a narrative that has taken some interesting turns and twists from the original purpose of what we were to do in the governor's office, the mission we were given by Governor Huntsman at the time. And so the STEM Action Center is a state-level STEM initiative. We were created by the Utah State Legislature in statute in 2013. So very clearly defined what we're supposed to do in 2013 and 2014, kind of our pivotal years legislatively, where a good portion of our funding came to play. And in the two bills in each of those years, it really defined who we are, what we should be doing by law. And we have a lot. I have to say, I think those two bills were probably some of the best written bills I've ever seen, because they were explicit enough so that we knew exactly what our job was from our state legislators, but they also left us enough latitude to be able to grow and innovate and kind of adapt and pivot. So it's been a really nice place to work. And so our vision and our mission is really to, at a statewide level, to all students, teachers, schools, community members, parents, and our companies, to promote and leverage and support STEM education, workforce development. And really to look at it through the lens of best practices, promising practices. And we see our role almost as an incubator. And some of our projects are ours to keep and hold and love and nurture into perpetuity. But many of our projects are really intended to be an incubation and to pilot them, to assess, evaluate, kind of do an iteration of improvement, and in the meantime look for partners where that project, once it shows its effectiveness and proves out to be best practice, we look for a partner that is willing to take it on with the resources to carry forward with it. So we give you kind of the benevolent handover without making it a burden on that partner. So that's where we kind of find our incubation role as well. We do have core values that we define in our most recent strategic plan, and those core values really revolve around, again, the innovation. That is really what we're about, innovation, incubation, to elevate STEM and advocate for it and continue the conversation around why it's important, to inspire students, teachers, parents, community members, to find every possible way to collaborate and partner. It's not about us, it's about our partners, really, and the shoulders that we stand on to do this work. And then also probably one of the most important things we try to do is to be accountable for what we do. For those of you who have been under the magnifying glass of legislators, it's a big accountability, and it should be. We do our work off the taxpayers' funds, right? And so we try a lot, and to that point, and you'll hear from some of our partners at the end of this, the Utah Education Policy Center. We work with third-party evaluators at the University of Utah on a number of our projects to do assessment, and particularly around some of those we receive a considerable amount of state funding every year. And then the other thing that really makes, I think, what we do a huge success, again, comes back to those partnerships. There is nothing that we do on our own in a vacuum. We have a very small team, so we can't grow and we can't take on new projects without finding partners to help with it. And so we like to, you'll hear from some of the partners we have today in our panel that we really do look to leverage what we do with other partners and support them through resources or our time and vice versa. And so kind of from an operational point of view, how do we do all of this? We've been blessed with legislative support, and so from day one with the bill that funded us in 2013, with the help of some key champions in the legislature, we received ongoing funding for operations. So we were sustained from day one. And that was key for us because it allowed us to not have to worry about our operational costs as we tried to figure out in those first 4 or 5 years what we were going to be when we grew up, right? So that was a very big deal. We receive a combination over time when we look at new projects, when we go to the state legislature, a combination of one-time funding for some things, which is much easier to get, of course, but we really strive to get ongoing funding for a lot of our work. And so And the other thing that was pretty key to what we did, it was probably about 2014, 15, I mean, we based what we did for our STEM Action Center by looking at best practices across other states. So this all kind of started, you know, pardon the overuse of the word, but incubating in our minds when I was state science advisor with Governor Huntsman, to look at what other states were doing and to really learn from them, and particularly the mistakes that they had made. And so there were a couple key things that rose to the top. One, it was absolutely imperative that we pick the right home for this new center. There were definitely less favorable places to go, right? And not because of bad places, but we found that in other states, you know, we really needed to stay out of institutions like higher education institutions, specific school districts, just because we needed to be agnostic. We needed to be for everyone, and there was a risk, as we see in other states, that if we were housed within a single institution, our mission would have to become their mission in order to sustain. And we needed to really maintain the mission of the legislature, the governor, and our statewide mandate. And so the best place we found was the Governor's Office of Economic Development at the time, and that was a great home for us to start out for the first 6 or 7 years. The other thing that we found is that in other states, the diversification of funding. Many states relied 100% on corporate funds, which had proven to be kind of a detrimental way to go. Others were 100% on state funds. And so we just thought, we've got to really diversify our funding portfolio from the very beginning. And so to that end, we operate out of a combination, about 30% of ongoing state funding, about 30% corporate donations, and about 30% from federal and state grants that we write in-house or in partnership with agencies and organizations. The donations, I think one of the really unique things that we've done as a state level agency, and trust me, it was no trivial thing to do, was to get legislative permission to establish a public 501c3 in our center. So we have the Utah STEM Foundation, and we've had it since it was, we received our letter of determination from the IRS in 2015 for the foundation. And we have a part-time director for that. She's amazing, Allison Spencer. And that's all of our corporate donations go through our foundation. And I should, you know, kind of taking that into the next place, next kind of point about what we did is that in about, gosh, Rochelle, you guys, we moved, it was 2 years ago, right, that we left Goetz, I think. Yeah, so there was a really strong legislative will for the Economic Development Office and the Governor's Office to kind of streamline and really focus on their core mission of economic development for the state. And so there's some of, you know, kind of us, groups like the STEM Action Center that were asked to find a new home, not only a new agency to live out of, a mothership, so to speak, but also a new physical space. So 2 years ago, we made the shift, and it went into effect in statute, that we moved from economic development into, oddly enough, a state agency called Department of Heritage and Arts, which is now named Community and Cultural Engagement. And on the surface, it sounds a little odd, and people were like, really? Is that Heritage and Arts, the STEM Action Center? And legislators were growling and grumbling, like, you sold us on economic development for STEM education, and now you're going over with museums and history. And it was really interesting. So we are one of 7 divisions in what is now the Department of Community and Cultural Engagement. The other divisions include the Division of State Libraries, History and Archives, Arts and Museums, Multicultural Affairs, Division of Indian Affairs, and then our state level AmeriCorps and Vista programs that receive the federal funding and allocate state programs. And so on the surface it seems a little odd, perhaps a misfit, but it is actually probably one of the best fits we could have ever found, from the standpoint that we already had partnerships with some of those divisions. For instance, we had a project with a state archaeologist around STEM already. We were working with state libraries with a program out of the Franklin Institute and National Science Foundation called, some of you may know this, the Leap into Science program, which is a STEM and reading program. And so we already had some of those beginning collaborations, and the guardrails came off once we became an official division. I was telling Dave and Linnea and some of the folks yesterday that state libraries is one of our best partners. They get funding from the federal government for the libraries, and they want to do STEM. We have the subject matter expertise in our center they have the funding and eager partners out in our rural libraries and our urban and suburban libraries. And so we started some amazing projects that I'll tell you a little bit about here in a few minutes with State Library Division. That's just one example. And we rely on our sister divisions a lot in how to navigate working with the Navajo Nation, some of our other tribal nations for STEM education and outreach. It's been phenomenal to work as a new division in that department. And then we also moved to a new physical location, which was really fun because we were in the World Trade Center when we were with the Governor's Office of Economic Development and had the opportunity with having to find a new physical space to say, okay, what's our next version of ourselves? Are we just a bunch of offices? Or are we really going to be a destination, kind of a demo model site for STEM program development? And the answer was yes, we wanted to do something more. So with the money we saved for being in the World Trade Center, we were able, for no extra cost, to add on an additional little over 2,000 square feet in our new space and create a community-based makerspace. And we call it the Innovation Hub because it's more than just a makerspace. It's a place where we can demo new STEM programs that we might develop in partnership with others. And honestly, it started out initially because, I don't know if you guys have worked with like First Robotics or Vex Robotics competitions, but we got a lot of calls from people saying, hey, a company who's loaned us some space for our robotics team, or because we don't have room at our school, or somebody rent some space for us. And we thought, well, if we create this new innovation hub with a makerspace in it, we could serve as a home to those robotics teams that need a space to home out of, and it would aggregate a need for coaches and mentors, where then we could have industry partners sign up when our teams were there in the space, and then they could actually be coaches and mentors to more than just one team by rotating and helping in that space. So it solved several problems. But what ended up happening is they became more than just a home for robotics teams. It became a place where we were able to meet other needs, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes with a new network we've established with our university partners across the state to collaborate. So we have a new space, and it's really fun too, I should say. We drove, actually, I don't know if you noticed, we kind of went a little out of our way yesterday. I realized we were about a block away from our new offices, so I kind of went one more block and pointed it out. We are also housed in a very unique space called the Columbus Hub of Columbus Hub. And it's a building that was built by a Utah nonprofit, Columbus Serves. They've been around about 55 years. And they were started by parents who wanted to provide resources for individuals with disabilities. And so they built a multi-purpose building, which has about 180 apartment units that are priced under market to be affordable for the community. There are also 12 apartments that are training apartments for individuals, mostly that are on the spectrum, to do life skill training in a training apartment. They also have the workforce development program on the other half of the ground level where we are. And so we have, and we're on the other half of the ground level in the retail space. So we have a wonderful partnership now where we're able to take on interns from Columbus Serves, both adult and youth interns, into our space. And we now have 3 interns from them. They're 2 adults, they're in their late 30s, and then 1 14-year-old that are helping in our makerspace. So it's really exciting to have that connection. So kind of going into programs, just to give you a flavor of how do we, a lot of people ask, well, how do you decide what programs to take on? How do you, what decides it? So there's one thing all of our programs that we have in common. One, they tie to our statute. We can draw a straight line to some component of statute so they can always stay aligned to what the legislators told us to do. And they tie to a strategic goal or objective in our strategic plan. We completed a new strategic plan the 2 is the first year of the code hit. We said, well, why sit around twiddling our thumbs? Let's launch into a 9-month strategic planning process. And we held virtual focus groups and did one-on-one interviews with parents, higher ed partners, community and cultural partners, you name it. And there were a couple things that came out of that plan. And some of them were kind of shocking, things that we thought we were doing a good job of. And we found out through feedback that we really needed to do a better job. One, we needed to work better with our partners in higher education, the post-secondary institutions. We weren't doing a very good job of that. 2, we needed to create or focus on programs that put STEM education resources into the homes with the parents, that were accessible to parents in communities. there was a real dearth of resources, and parents were speaking out quite loudly. They wanted more to use at home. And we also needed to look at early STEM learning resources. There was a real need for early STEM learning opportunities that we didn't have enough resources for. Those were some of the big things that came out of it. Luckily for us, workforce development wasn't a huge lift for us because we have our friends at Talent Ready Utah that they're out of the governor's office as well, that really take on the workforce development components of STEM education. So it's kind of a shared burden. We work together on it, which is nice. And then our programs, where they kind of differ is whether or not we design them ourselves, or if we openly beg, borrow, steal, and adapt from others. All of our programs have in common, for the most part, that we don't do them by ourselves. They're often in partnership with others, whether or not, like for state libraries, they provide the funding, we put the ideas there, and then we work together to get the resources out to the libraries, on bookmobiles, you name it. And one thing that's really interesting for those of you, if you want to think about working with your state libraries, at least for the Utah State Library Division, they can fund anything if it's going into a library, and not just a community or a county or a city or state library, but also school libraries. So one of the things we're doing is working to fund some pilot makerspaces, both in rural libraries, but also schools. We can fund makerspaces in school libraries, and it's a really cool kind of repurposing of a library's role, even in a school. As long as that activity or that program is happening in a library, the library division can use their federal funds for that program to support it, which was something we didn't know. It's been really great. So, but again, kind of I digress a bit, but that's where our programs can differ depending upon who we partner with, where the funding comes from, but they all tie to statute, they all tie to strategic plans, and the majority of them we don't do by ourselves. We just can't. So we have a couple categories of programs. One of the biggest ones where a lot of our state funding goes are what we call foundational. I don't need to tell you guys why math is such a big piece of what we do. It was one of our very first programs that was funded was to support math. And so we received, I think, $5 million ongoing for our math program. And it was really to use supplemental software in classrooms to support math instruction. That's been going on for 7 years now. Education Policy Center has helped do the external evaluation. It's been a huge success, and it's been a lot of work. And one of the things that we decided is that we can't be in the business of software distribution forever. We've got to really, get the school districts to take on the financial cost of the licenses if it's valuable to them. And the good news is, majority of our districts are like, yeah, this is working. We'll start building it into our budgets. And so what we've been able to do then is look at what we call Math 2.0, what's next in math. So we have a couple new programs in math we launched last year. One is a mentoring program, an in-school math mentor program. We hire individuals through AmeriCorps funds that go in and do small group math mentoring with 4th through 8th grade students. It's been a little challenging because of COVID, but we're really starting to see some traction on it, and we've got a lot of great partners such as United Way, the University of Utah, Salt Lake Community College, so it's been a good program. Stay tuned. We've got some preliminary data that shows that qualitatively it's being well received from qualitative feedback. We also have what we call Milo and Friends. We blatantly stole this program from the state of Washington. They call theirs Ello and Friends. It's a reading literacy program. We call it Milo, which is Math Introduction and Learning Opportunities, and Milo the Moose is the mascot for this one, and Milo has plenty of friends, such as yet to be named a seagull and a fox, and I hope a dinosaur, I think, is coming out of it, but they're cute little cartoon characters, but it's really a math campaign for parents. And there'll be some PSA work around it for communication of why is it so important to talk to your children about math and work with them. Part of it will also be we've spent a lot of work, we being Clarence Ames in our office, who's kind of our math expert, to vet high quality games that can facilitate learning of math in the homes. So part of the Milo and Friends campaign will be to hand out bags with 3 to 4 high quality math games for parents to take home and keep. The only thing they have to do is come to one of our family math nights at a library and kind of learn how to use those games in like an hour of instruction. So we've got math games with Milo and Friends, Minters, and we'll still retain a portion of our software program for those schools who still need support. We also do professional learning for K-12 teachers. Pretty straightforward. We've been doing grants, kind of open-ended grants that really have one thing in common, allowing school districts to build strategic plans for professional development for K-12 educators. We are moving to a new model of that, to get out of just grants for the sake of grants, which is a very dangerous place to be on legislative funds. We don't want to stay in that space forever. We're now taking what we learned in 6 years of professional learning grants with our districts and evolving to what we call the Utah STEM Master Educator Innovation Center, or USMAC. This is a 5-year fellowship program for K-12 educators. They come to us as a cohort, they apply with the problem of practice. They spend a couple of years researching that, building a network of technical assistants, resource partners, and then they spend the last 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years, actually implementing a solution or solutions that evolved from that research and assessing that in their school, their district, whatever the unit of change that was defined. So we're excited to launch that this year for the first time.
So I'm just curious, is there any compensation for teachers to do?
Yeah, they receive a $10,000 stipend every year for each of 5 years. And the hope is that for those, we were applying for a NOIS grant, we didn't get it, for the master track, and the constraint there was they had to get a master's degree during that 5 years, but we didn't get the grant, so we don't have the constraint. The other thing that was nice too is, speaking to people in the ATE world here, NOIS was really difficult because they didn't really like the idea of career and tech ed teachers being a part of a cohort. They were like, oh, we don't know, but go ahead and apply, and then if you get funded, we'll tell you yes or no. And I'm like, well, okay. But the good news now is that since we're doing it all of our own state funds every year, career and tech ed teachers, Sandy's nodding her head because she's a CTE specialist, that we can have cohorts of CTE teachers, we can have cohorts of CTE and science and math teachers, whatever. They can even bring some counselors in if they feel that the professional learning and problem practice piece that they're doing would benefit. So so 10,000 extra every single year, not a base salary change, but a stipend that goes on top of salary. So then we do have a STEM designation program. So a school can apply to become a STEM school. It's a 32-component application. It is not trivial. It is a beastie application. It goes through review by a panel. It's a partnership with the State Board of Education for the review and approval process. We have, I think, almost 60 schools that have been awarded some level of STEM designation status. A few have graduated to the next level. It's a mentor-based thing. Those schools who have been a STEM designated school for a couple of years mentor new incoming applicants. Schools, most of them are elementary, a few junior highs, no high schools. And there's motivation, kind of a broad, there's a lot of reasons to apply. Some of the schools apply because they just had a charter school open a couple blocks down the street, and they're feeling the threat of losing enrollments. Some parents are pressuring them, they want a STEM school. But the one thing that we're really starting to do is kind of gather the data, because they have to assess their own progress and look at the impact of STEM school designation on student achievement, teacher retention, et cetera. And then Kelly, who runs this, she has actually reached out to other states, and she has 10 other states now that we've kind of created a network of states that have similar programs to learn from each other, these kind of STEM designation programs. We also have a computer science partnership grant. It's ongoing funding from the state every year. We don't do computer science for the sake of more classes, more teachers, and more schools. We really fund grants that are around integrating CSIT into experiential learning processes and programs and projects. And honestly, in the last couple of years, a lot of the grants have focused on maker spaces that can integrate computer science and robotics, et cetera. And so that's been nice. It's a smaller amount of money, so we don't fund as many projects, but districts are really innovative in what they bring to us for these projects. And then lastly, kind of going back to our idea of our hub that we have in our new space with the maker space, we just kind of signed our memorandum of agreement or collaboration with handful of partners across the state of universities for our Utah Innovation Hub Network. And so this is, I call it kind of the circle of love. We've got, we've got Utah Tech University in St. George. We've got Southern Utah University, which is just north of that. Utah Valley University, which is next valley down south. Our center, Weber State, so almost all of our universities are involved in this project. And so what we've agreed to do through their maker spaces that they have is we're looking at what we can do to support the growing number of maker spaces in schools and libraries. So we're looking at developing turnkey programs that they can implement in their spaces in libraries or schools. We're looking at technical assistance, professional learning opportunities, assessment support to assess whether or not they're effective spaces. And so as a network, we'll start developing those resources and then creating a network of collaboration to our schools and our libraries to support them on this. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I mean, it's been a growing need. We get calls every week from school districts, from community space saying, hey, we want to, in fact, I just opened up an email last night from an elementary school in Granite School District, Oakwood Elementary. They want to put a makerspace in their school to help support STEM instruction and to kind of, I think, support enrollments and keep enrollments strong in their feeder system. And so that's what we're trying to do, is to help support those emerging makerspaces by helping them become more than just a makerspace, but a true space for learning by doing. And so that's a brand new one, just got it going, and we'll see how it goes. So far, it's been well received by all of our partners. And we did just receive an AmeriCorps grant to hire 45 AmeriCorps members to distribute across the networks to support those makerspaces.
So I'm going to continue to ask questions.
You bet. No, please do.
So essentially, by recruiting the higher ed partners, they're going to help mentor and become part of the solution for sustaining these libraries.
Absolutely, and the school makerspaces too. I mean, because that's the challenge with makerspaces. They've got a bad rep for becoming white elephants very quickly, right? Because it's a mindset. You can't just have a makerspace and think you're just going to 3D print and amen, hallelujah, you're done with it. We have a makerspace. And that's what you often see in a library, right? Is you see a 3D printer sitting in the corner. And so what we're trying to do is to make the investment pay off. Whether it's a community-based one or it's really focused on supporting students in a school, we want to make sure that it evolves to meet the needs of the community it's supposed to be serving. And we're really lucky we have probably one of the leading researchers around makerspaces as an effective learning environment up at Utah State, Brianna Litz. She's been doing research around these types of informal learning spaces for years and is helping us with the evaluation component of it. So I'm excited. This has been, and what it does is it takes our little makerspace and makes sure that we serve a statewide function rather than just in our own little community. Which, by the way, we do. We have open Tinker Time on Fridays. It's hilarious. We open up at noon and stay open until 8 p.m. on Fridays. And it's not unusual to find 35 to 40 kids from our neighborhood there, and then at 8 p.m. their parents are dragging them out in tears because they don't want to leave. The kids love it, and even some of the parents are doing projects now from the apartments, just the apartments in our space, which is a really, it's a growing refugee community for us. So yeah, a couple of our other, so we do a lot of, oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, please do.
I was just curious, aside from 3D printers, what other kind of technologies do you guys have available in these makerspaces, especially for the ones that the students have opportunities to play?
We have anything from laser cutting and 3D printing. We have woodworking. We have textile work, like industry grade sewing machines. Because e-textiles, the kids love the e-textile stuff. I mean, we have Halloween bag competitions and ugly Christmas sweater competitions with e-textiles. Kids love it. And it's an easy entry, right? We have welding corner and soldering. The kids learn to solder. The older kids can learn to weld. We have CNC mill. We have kind of scanning. Those are kind of the bigger pieces. We have about a dozen 3D printers. They're a pain in the butt, but our Becca Robinson, who runs ours, has done a lot of homework and has found the perfect 3D printer for anybody who's interested in creology. So a wealth of resources on repairing and maintaining. So yeah, those kind of just the basic stuff that we have in the space. So yeah, it's helped kids build robots, but go beyond the robots too. So yeah. So then our outreach, and we do a lot of outreach and engagement, right? Because what you do is really based upon how early you can get to them and get them excited. And so we have a number of programs. We actually have a STEM bus, a 40-foot bus that was donated by Utah Transit Authority. She's an old gal and doesn't go far, and has to stay close to home these days, but it's a beautiful bus. But because of COVID, we pivoted all the programs with our, we call it STEM in Motion. All of those programs pivoted to in-classroom kits that are dropped off, left for 2 weeks, and picked back up and sanitized. So we have about 20 kits for our STEM in Motion program that we leave with teachers, and they pass them on. And usually they get through about 5 to 6 classes in the school before we pick them up. We've got data that shows that it's working, so if anybody's interested in the data we've collected from this mobile STEM program, we can share it with you. Teachers love it. Yeah, Tom.
Hey, Tami, question about the data since you mentioned it. There's a difficulty in collecting data when you're talking about folks that are a little bit younger.
Yeah.
And the data is super important. Can you kind of share a little bit about how you guys might be able to collect that data that can be rolled into other sources of funding and support for the system?
Yeah, so it is tricky, right? Because we don't operate necessarily. Some of our programs operate under an IRB with our universities, but not all of our in-classroom programs such as this. So it's really up to the teacher to decide if he or she wants to collect those surveys from the students. And most of the teachers support the programs to the point where they're happy to make sure their administrators are on board, the parents are on board to distribute and collect surveys from the students. So all of our qualitative feedback data from those programs is done really kind of in an informal manner. Now, some of our other stuff, we work through the University of Utah under an IRB to collect data. For instance, we do have our early math learning kits, which is a program we kind of stole from Washington STEM, their state STEM in Washington. It's an early math learning piece. They did it as an in-person thing, but we pivoted to a kit, and we call them our 2 Learn kits. And they're really about teaching early math in everyday activities. So we have paint to learn, build to learn, play to learn, explore to learn. I can't remember the others, but those, we collect the data. There's a QR code, and the parents at home have to voluntarily submit, kind of click on the QR and go to the survey. And we've actually had about a 30% response. We piloted this with a grant from Boeing, and it's been going on now. We've completed the 1 year of the pilot, and we had about a 32% response rate from parents on those kits with the 7,000 that were distributed. So we've had some pretty good luck with collecting data that way too. We have also what we call, this is kind of to the community outreach. We have, how many of you guys have seen the little knitting libraries in your neighborhoods, the little stand-up? Well, we kind of stole that idea and adapted it. We call them STEM spots. They're bigger, and they're for distributing STEM books in a community. So it's another, leave one, take one. We have someone in the community that kind of oversees it and makes sure it still, kind of has a decent amount of STEM books. One of our partners helped us create a kind of a flat pack IKEA model, so that if a community wants a STEM spot, they just email us, let us know, and we have a flat pack we can either mail or distribute to them with easy instructions to assemble. It's very IKEA-like, and it's pretty cool. And we put our early math learning kits in. We have about 50 STEM books in both Spanish and English that go into the kit spaces. The community can decorate it any way they want. It comes unfinished, but with everything they need to put a weatherproof roof on it, and then they just paint it however they want. And we have, so far, I think we have 40 out there, and we have another 70 requested. So we rely on volunteers to come in and help us. It's a 1-sheet cutout on a CNC, and they just pack it up, zip it up, and send it out. And so we have industry volunteers that come in every week and kind of help get a handful made and get them out. So, but we're very behind on that one because the demand has been great. And the interesting thing is that a lot of our libraries in rural communities are requesting them, and they're putting them near their library, so there's 24-hour access to books in the community. So that's been a really exciting program, and it's been funded 100% off of industry donations. It's an easy one to sell to companies for donations. And even Home Depot and Lowe's have donated lumber for a certain number of them as well. We have a podcast called How'd You Think of That with Temple Grandin. Some of you I've reached out to, but she wanted a project during COVID and was willing to work with us to do a podcast series on the importance of diverse thinking in STEM. And so she interviews researchers, scientists, even artists that do work in STEM to ask them, how'd you come up with that idea, and how important, and how did, what led you to it, and what were the diverse, kind of what influenced how you went about doing it. And she tries to peel out that diverse thinking component around their idea. And so it's been a lot of fun. We've got, I can send you the link, but it's on our website. You can link to it. And we have a producer that's got, over 30 years in public radio productions that she's running it for us. So it's been a fun project. We have a magic show, one of our best programs. We don't have to do a thing for it other than just keep the money coming to it. We have a magician, Paul Brewer, and his daughter Brooklyn, that travel the state to elementary schools and do a STEM magic show. It's wonderful. It is so much fun. They're so good. And it's really met a need for elementary schools where they want something they can do in an auditorium for an assembly. So it was something, schools kept asking us, we have an assembly, a couple hundred kids, can you come up and do something? I'm like, elephant toothpaste? I don't know. And then I saw Paul Brewer do a magic show, and he had a little bit of math in it, and I thought, boy, I'll bet he could actually really fine-tune this to STEM, and he has. And it comes complete with a rabbit and a pigeon or a dove. And the kids are buzzing with excitement. The feedback from the teachers is phenomenal. So something so simple has really become one of our most popular programs. So that's the other one. Every year we do a STEM Fest. So how many of you guys have like the STEM festivals, the expos? We do that, and there's a couple big ones, regional ones. Ours is a 2-day event. It's not any different than probably anything that you guys do. One of the things that we heard from our schools is they wanted to do something that was smaller and could reach the younger kids. And so, lo and behold, Utah Valley University and some of our collaborators in the School of Education had developed this kind of pop-up version of a science and tech festival type thing. It's like, I don't know, I remember when I was a kid, there was, muscular dystrophy. I don't know if you remember, you could call Bright and request a carnival kit, and you could do your own fundraising carnival in your backyard. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could do pop-up carnivals like that? So we have we call them our Micro STEM Fest. Schools can request them. They have 10 stations that kids rotate through. They're designed for grades 1st through about 4th. And they're designed also to have the older kids, the 5th and 6th graders, run the stations in a near-peer mentoring style. It's we just piloted our first, we had about 30 of them now, and kind of doing a little improvement on it, but they're great kits, 100% non-consumable, so they can be used every time. Each kit is about, I'm blanking. The kits are about 1,400 to stock. So it's a pretty affordable program. This is all off of corporate donations. We've got about 40 kits now that we've distributed regionally, and industry partners help get the kits to the school, help the kids set it up, float and help pack it up and get it back to the distribution center. So it's also supported by industry partners. We have STEM backpack programs, state libraries, back to school STEM backpacks, back to summer, going to summer backpacks. Been hugely successful, about 900 backpacks distributed for the summer, mostly to rural libraries. Activities, they're themed. This year is Oceans of Fun for the summer. So all marine science, ecology, marine ecology stuff. And then we also have a hydroponics program in partnership with Green Our Planet out of Nevada. Amazing program, turnkey for K through 5. It advances and grows at each grade level if a school wants to do it as a whole school implementation. Bank of Nevada and Utah Bankers Association funds it. We're just launching our next 20 schools We have 12 libraries that have hydroponics programs for the community now with this program. It's a good one because we tend to be really tech-heavy, engineering and tech-heavy in our activities, and we're really trying to get more of the life sciences, the biological sciences into our programming. So this was one of our first programs we got out there. You can teach a lot with it, and particularly in a state that's drought-ridden, hydroponics is phenomenal in teaching a lot of different concepts around nutrition and food science and healthy lifestyles, plant science, soil science, you name it. This is in partnership with 4-H Extension. They've been working with us on this. And then finally we have our Chief Science Officer program, our CSO that we're launching this fall out of SciTech Institute. Is anybody, a number of states have this program. It's been going around about 9 years. Jeremy Babendour started it out of SciTech in Arizona. A really cool program. You should look into it, see if your state runs one somewhere. It's like a student body officer program, but these are STEM officers, and they advocate for STEM in their school. And so they put together an action plan every year, which has 2 to 3 activities that are STEM related that will support needs around STEM for their school or their community. And it's a phenomenal program. We've talked to a number of the graduates from other states, like Atlanta. We've talked to some kids out of some schools in Atlanta, and then Arizona kids, and then I think we had a few out of Baltimore, some school districts in Baltimore that we talked to that had been doing it since they were in the 7th grade and they're high school seniors. I mean, there's a leadership component that these kids were amazing. And from what Jeremy tells me, they're not unusual. They didn't just pick the cream of the crop for us to talk to. He said, nearly every kid that comes out of this, being a chief science officer in their school, will change their trajectory. So anyway, that's a good one. We're just launching that, but there's a lot of data, a lot of information out there because it's been going on for 9 years in about 15 different states, and actually a couple countries too. Mexico is involved. So it's a really nice program. And industry is supporting that. We're going to have industry come in and adopt a CSO program at a school and how industry partners help support their action plan. And that's really, we've got other things that we do. We do this a best practices conference for teachers every year. And we do, actually, now we have 3 regional ones we do. We're doing Week of STEM this year for the first time. The governor asked us to do that. And we also have a STEM Education Access Coalition, or SEEC. It's really an equity coalition of partners that are really looking to do targeted, measurable plans around equity, access, and diversity in their STEM programs. So that's kind of who we are, what we do. It sounds like a kitchen sink of programs, but there really was a purpose for all these programs that met a strategic goal or objective in our plan. And I think the team will tell you that we're at capacity at this point in time, but we're still having a lot of fun with it.